We got a bombshell of a Supreme Court decision. Have a seat for this one, everybody. The United States Supreme Court 6-3 MAGA majority has just ruled for the first time in American history. Now it's going to have to be done through individual class action cases and/or individual lawsuits in all 50 states about something so fundamental. The district court level, the first line of defense to protect our Constitution, no longer have the power to issue nationwide or what's called universal injunctions to block abuses of executive power.
What if I told you the Supreme Court just made it 10 times harder to stop an unlawful executive order in its tracks? And spoiler, it's bad news for millions of Americans. Let me explain how this ruling could turn the fight for your rights into a legal nightmare. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Imagine a Supreme Court ruling so big it could redefine executive power in the United States. And instead of tackling it, they zoomed in on the fine print. That's what happened in Trump versus CASA Incorporated. This was a blockbuster case that had everyone bracing for the court to weigh in on the constitutional question of birthright citizenship. The issue could affect millions. Children born to undocumented parents who've built lives here. Families living in legal limbo. It wasn't just a legal debate, it was about identity, belonging, and whether the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship to anyone born on U.S. soil.
About 100 years of precedent allowing federal courts at the district court level and at the Court of Appeals level to issue injunctions that stop an abuse of power by the executive branch. No, says the supermajority. The United States Supreme Court didn't just rule that the 14th Amendment can be changed by executive order like Donald Trump wants, but it did just totally turn upside down and reverse. You can't ever use it because it's not part of the history of America, and the only court that's allowed to make effectively a nationwide declaration about whether the executive branch is out of control or not is the United States Supreme Court.
So what did the court do? They skipped the fireworks entirely. Instead of answering the birthright citizenship question, they sidestepped, choosing to focus on a much quieter issue: nationwide injunctions. These legal tools have been around for decades as a way for federal courts to block potentially unconstitutional executive actions across the country. Think major policies, big executive orders. Judges could slam the brakes on something the government was doing, coast to coast, with a single ruling. But the Supreme Court decided that was too much power for lower courts. They overturned over a century of precedent, effectively limiting judges to issuing decisions that only apply to the specific parties in a case. It's like responding to a 5-alarm fire by rethinking how you'll organize the junk drawer. Sure, it might fix a smaller problem, but it doesn't stop the flame.
They're all only now about those states. What about the other 47 states and the people born in those states under the 14th Amendment? No, the Supreme Court says, well, we're not here on the merits of the 14th Amendment. Only the parties that are in front of that judge. You know, we have 3 different nationwide injunctions that just got struck down or stopped about birthright citizenship. We got Maryland, we got Massachusetts, we got California. The judge and it cannot. We are now going to take back the power to declare things in due course with a right order of operation, as Kavanaugh said, about a case.
What Justice Barrett and the majority argued is that nationwide injunctions weren't rooted in American legal tradition, yet limiting them leaves real effects hanging in the balance. Here's where things get tricky. Without those injunctions, the executive branch now gets more wiggle room. If the president wanted to push through a controversial policy overnight, challengers would need to fight back state by state. And good luck doing that quickly. For the millions at risk of losing protections, it's like finding out the safety net holding you up just got significantly smaller.
And then you have to have a ruling about it. That's one. Or two, you've got to move quickly off of a preliminary injunction, get it up on an emergency basis to a willing appellate court, get it up on an emergency basis to a willing United States Supreme Court, meaning we only got 2 ways now to rein in an abuse of power, lawless, or as Amy Coney, as Ketanji Brown Jackson says in her dissent, I'll read from, a law-free zone of Donald Trump to make a declaration about the substance of the matter, the merits of the case. So as of right now, Let me just summarize it this way as I continue this hot take. I'm Michael Popok on the Midas Touch Network.
So instead of clarifying one of the most contentious citizenship questions, they've now created a bigger issue, a world where executive overreach is harder to stop, and the people who'll feel the brunt, we'll talk about them next. What happens when the court tells the most vulnerable people in the country, sorry, you're on your own now? That's what this ruling feels like for millions of struggling Americans. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson didn't hold back in her dissent, pointing out that the ones hit hardest are exactly who you'd expect: the poor, the uneducated, and the unpopular. These are the people who can't just lawyer up at the drop of a hat to challenge presidential decisions that might bulldoze their rights. They're the ones left standing in a system rigged to favor those with money, connections, or the luxury of time.
Narrow their injunction from a nationwide injunction to a narrow injunction only involving that state particularly. What it means for right now is that those 3 judges that have blocked the executive order of Donald Trump on birthright citizenship, then those lawyers have to move quickly, and they will, like the ACLU, Democracy Now, on the Democracy Forward, move quickly to get to the appellate court quickly.
Here's the real kicker. Now, instead of one single nationwide ruling that could stop an unlawful executive order in its tracks, individual groups have to fight it out, state by state. That means the road to justice just got a whole lot longer, messier, and packed with roadblocks. Imagine you're a single mom with a bone to pick over a harmful executive order. Before, you could rely on one case to represent voices like yours across the nation. Now, you'd have to round up and organize hundreds of others like you, and then prove to the courts you're a class worthy of being heard. And guess what? All of that takes time. Too much for most people. Justice Jackson didn't mince words. She dubbed it a law-free zone, where the executive branch can flex its power unchecked, knowing that the courts now struggle to act as meaningful referees. This, she argued, doesn't affect everyone equally. Those cozy with government policies will barely notice a shift, but the poor, the marginalized, the ones already stretched thin, just surviving, they're being left to navigate an impossibly expensive and confusing maze. Here's where it gets darker. Jackson called this setup anathema to the rule of law, a harsh indictment, but one that fits. She argued it erodes justice in favor of power, letting the executive act first and worry about how legal it was, or wasn't, far too late. And the majority, they're giving the executive branch the green light to press forward, daring a rising number of David-like challengers to step into a courtroom Goliath won't fear. This ruling isn't just some legal footnote, it's a power shift that makes it tougher for everyday Americans to push back against executive decisions. Justice Jackson called it a law-free zone, and she's not wrong. The poor, the unpopular, the underrepresented, they're the ones bearing the brunt, forced to fight massive legal battles with resources they don't have. If this alarms you, now's the time to act. Write to your representatives, back advocacy groups, and stay involved. This fight isn't over. The Supreme Court dodged the big question today, but the ripple effects, they'll shape our rights for years to come.